And Singapore moving to provide more employment opportunities for locals in key sectors and also making CPF policies and processes simpler. For a closer look, we're joined by Associate Professor Walter Theseira from the Singapore University of Social Sciences. Professor Theseira, those CPF policies, why do some find them so difficult to understand? And do you have specific examples of what might be some of the common pain points experienced?
Well, the key issue is in the CPF system, you have to make decisions today that have impact many decades down the road. And the connection between what you're doing today in terms of saving and investment and retirement adequacy maybe 30 to 40 years later is not easy to understand. I mean, for example, suppose you want to put an additional $1,000 into your CPF today. How much of a difference does it make 30 years down the road for your retirement? How does that change depending on whether you're investing, which account you're putting it into? So I think that's a bit challenging for people to understand. The second issue is that you can understand what CPF policy is doing, but you might disagree with it. So, think about the retirement sum. You can understand it's supposed to ensure you've got a basic retirement payout for life. So you can only withdraw cash above the retirement sum. But you might disagree about how the retirement sum is calculated. You might say it shouldn't apply to you because you don't expect, for example, to live as long as everyone else. So it's not just about whether you understand CPF, it's also a matter of making the case for why policies are designed that way.
And how can the ministry then better streamline these policies and its complexities? Are there any best practices perhaps elsewhere that you think Singapore could adopt?
Well, I think there are some key differences between CPF and social security systems elsewhere. The beauty of the CPF system is that it's very transparent in telling members exactly how much money they've saved up. So it's very accountable. We can look at our account any day and see how much money we have. But that's also the problem because people struggle to translate that money in the CPF account into retirement adequacy. So they don't know when looking at it, are they going to have a comfortable retirement? Do they need to do more to set aside more money? Now, when you look at social security systems elsewhere, they tend to make promises instead about what kind of income you'll get in retirement. So they promise you a certain sum per week or a certain percentage of your average working salary. And that's easier for people to understand. People have a sense about how much they can afford to spend relative to their income. Now, there are other issues here, of course. Pension promises elsewhere may not be sustainable because a lot of those systems are tax financed. But I think the key point is we could consider whether we can move more towards explaining CPF in terms that people understand, like how good of a retirement are you going to get if you keep on contributing the way that you are to CPF?
Professor Theseira, you mentioned being able to look at those balance numbers and see how much one has. It's quite simple to some, but not to all of us. Automation has brought this greater convenience, but those who might be less tech savvy, who don't know how to use the app, as an example, on a phone, they might fall behind as far as this is concerned. What must the government actually consider as they make those CPF processes easier?
Yeah, that's a very good point. When it comes to, big decisions about your future and finances, people often feel worried if they don't have somebody trusted they can consult. And there is a very large private industry in Singapore that caters to that desire to do retirement planning. But the problem is that industry is very expensive. You have to pay quite a bit for financial advisors. So I think the key is how do you make money management through your CPF system easy and cost effective. And you really do need to use technology there. But we also can think about whether there's a role for more public funding of advice, especially for people who are not so technology savvy. Now, there is already a CPF retirement planning service, which is free for members approaching 55. But as I pointed out earlier, we've got this big gap many years before you reach 55, where people are making pretty important decisions about CPF. And I think it's worth thinking about whether we can do more publicly funded services to help people have that connection there.
Okay, Mayor, thanks for speaking to us this evening. Associate Professor Walter Theseira from the Singapore University of Social Sciences.